Hello and welcome back. And that's right, we're returning to the happy, joyful subject of fraud and Seagate hard drives. That's right, we've already talked about this a couple of times in the last month. And thanks again to Lutz Labs over at Heise.de for his phenomenal work in correlating a lot of these reports that have been sent his way and also communicating with Seagate. Now, this video, we've got Lutz Labs here on a call and we're going to be talking through the status quo, how this whole thing started, his suspicions about where these drives may have come from, and also the broader long-term impact on this. Also, later on in the video, after the call, we're going to talk about an article over on Blocks and Files where Seagate have issued some statements on this, a lot more than in a lot of other platforms, and I would argue they could stand to be a little noisier about this. But ultimately, if you want the latest information about this, there are links in the description to the more recent articles on Heise.de alongside the Blocks and Files article that we're going to talk about later on and a few other statement areas there. But without further ado, let's kick straight on with the call. Hello and welcome back, everyone. And we are continuing talking about what's going on with reused, recertified, dodgy Seagate hard drives right now that have been identified and being sold as new. This is the third video in a series where we've talked about this. And lucky for us, we've got Lutz Labs here from Heise, who, you're the editor, I believe, of
Yeah,
Heise.
that's right.
And you guys have pretty much been spearheading all of this. Obviously, you've been collaborating with Seagate a great deal on this with a lot of the reports you've been getting in, but I just thought it was, with everything that's going on, to really go to the horse's mouth here and just discuss everything that's going on, what's happened, what the current state of affairs with all of this, and probably most important of all, how concerned should users be long term? But I mean, if you were to praise it so far, what's happened?
There's a lot of things happened, I think. The story began with one guy from Germany, one of our readers, who sent us an email. Hey, guys, perhaps this is a faulty drive, I don't know. I have this farm data here, and it's different from the smart values. And after that, we talked a little bit about that, and I wrote an online news and got dozens of mails after that. And not only from Germany, they came from Switzerland, from Austria, from Luxembourg. And there are a lot of official Seagate dealers involved. And so I thought, hey, this must be larger. This must be really larger. Then I wrote another mail news. And from now until now, I have more than 250 mails, only mails in my inbox. I've not counted any forums or other forums or any other news sites. So there are news from the US, from UK, in Japan. It's all over the world. I think it's.
And these are, sorry to interrupt, these are all affected users.
Yeah, right. Well, there's a little bit confusion about OEM drives. And okay, I know this problem, of course. And these 250 or even 300 are only faulty drives, fraud drives,
Okay.
not OEM drives. I sold them out. So it's really getting a lot.
I would say, Mike, at the moment, would you say that predominantly the impact has been within Europe, really, about people that have been, I'm going to use the word missold here, and I know there's a slight grey area about how these drives have been sold to users, and we could talk about the supply chain later, but have the bulk of affected users been in Europe?
I think so. Or perhaps the bulk of the users who noticed that is in Europe. That could be the other thing. Because we have some, then the US there is a large reseller called Nivec. And both of those, these US guys bought it there. So it is there in the US too. I don't know how much, of course. And it seems that hard drives are even not such a big story anymore in the US, perhaps.
Well, even then, I mean, one of the things we alluded to in some of our coverage at NAS Compares, which again was largely based on everything you were sharing with the public. I mean, there was obviously talk a lot of the time about drives that were being absolutely hammered during that, cryptocurrency Chia, and then
Hmm.
being resold on. And if we use just Seagate as the platform, I went into some of their quarterly reports, and fiscal year end of 2021, they shipped 535 exabytes of
Yeah.
just hard drives, and then a large purport of those are 14, 16, and 18 TB drives. Obviously, they
Right.
made an absolute killing during that period,
Hmm.
and again, it's been sort of bandied around back and forth about a lot of these drives perhaps being involved in Chia farming. And I mean, have you seen much to indicate a lot of merit to that?
Yes, there was also one of our readers who is living in China, and he also wrote me a large email, and he said, well, he didn't know that if it's really if these drives are from China, from Chia network, of course. But
Mm.
he told me there are a lot of used drives in the market there, and used drives are you can't sell them as good
Yeah,
as new drives.
yeah. I mean, if you know
And
what you're doing, yeah.
yeah, especially if you have such, I do, the Chia network lost about 16 exabyte in the last 6 months.
Okay.
If you think about 16 terabyte per drive, so you have 1 million drives, which are gone out of the Chia network.
Mm,
Perhaps, so I assumed that there must be a combination of both. So there
mm.
must be a reason for these drives. Somewhere they have to go.
I mean,
And everybody in the world said, "Hey, they are from the China network."
mm. Well, again, I guess a lot of us, myself included, did jump to conclusions somewhat on that. But I mean, even just going back to that idea of it being largely, I mean, the majority of the reported drives thus far that people have, because it isn't the most straightforward way to identify if your drives. I mean, if you go above and beyond the odd dent or scratch, and maybe if you do some of the date of manufacture comparisons
Hmm.
there, those are less invasive methodologies to find out if your drives are, missold to you. But my concern, I talked about in a lot of the videos before, was how they got into the supply chain. Because
Yeah.
if it is solely based in Europe, and again, I used to work in retail insofar as I knew exactly where the supply chain were and where a reseller would live or where an authorized distributor would live. And for that number of drives to be introduced into the European supply chain, which
Hmm.
does have a large shared network. I mean, I think Tech Data, I'm not sure if Hypertech deal with hard drives and some of these resellers that are largely European based. But if drives were introduced in that fashion, again, I put a big if that was the main way this is introduced, can you think of any way, and I'm putting you on the spot slightly, how those
Sure.
drives would have been integrated into the supply chain?
No, I have absolutely no idea how they got there.
Because that's the big question, isn't it? I mean,
That is a big question, right?
Seagate themselves, they have obviously not done this because
Yeah, for
Seagate
sure.
have been legally and with authorization and transparency selling reused and refurbished, and there's a
Right,
number of different
right.
handles for drives for a long time. And there is definitely some people blurring the lines between Seagate are doing this and Seagate have always sold, and it's just not the same thing. But I mean, with your communication with Seagate over this, has their reaction, and once again, I am putting you slightly on the spot, but how immediate has their response to this been?
Their response was really fast, but they didn't tell me a lot.
That's disappointing, given how
That's
much.
right. It's really disappointing. Um, uh, so from time to time, I ask them, "What about this drive? Here's a reader who has problems. Look at the data, please."
Mm,
And after a few mails, they told me, "We cannot tell you any more about specific drives.
okay.
Stop. We don't do that anymore." I think, okay, this has legal reasons, of course,
GDPR,
because
etc.
there
Yeah.
are internal investigations. So I think their lawyers told also the press officers, stop talking about that.
I mean, that is That's not great.
Nope, that is not great, really.
Wow.
I talked to the European press person from time to time, and she told me a little bit more. So this was you read my last news, I think. So that these farm data can also be altered now. It seems so.
Damn.
And there is a German engineer I know very good, but of course he cannot tell me anything because he is also involved in this Seagate thing. But the European press officer cited him that this data is collected from all over the hard disk drive. There's no specific point where this farm data is stored. This data is collected from different places, and I think the scammers have now the possibility to delete one specific point, but not all.
Which is, I mean, my main concern with there is, I mean, now you take analysis of farm data out of the equation, and ignore my cat there in the background, who's got phenomenal timing. But I mean, what else can people do to identify on a software level that their drives may be erroneous? I mean, again, I've covered them a few before, and I've gone, like with your articles, you've made phenomenal recommendations for tools as well. Your most recent one, you highlighted that Docker application for identifying, isolating a lot of that farm data information, which now may seem moot. But is there any other recommendations, really, that more current ones that you think you could make to people for checking their drives?
The best application are the smart mount tools, because the code for the farm data, also for getting the farm data out of the drive, was written by a Seagate guy.
Okay.
I think that's a very interesting thing. That's fine. Huh? I know the guy who's I think everybody in your audience knows the smart mount tools. I mean, and one of the main suppliers is Christian Franke, and he's a German. I've contact with him, and he told me some things to get more details out of these drives. I have written one article about that.
I'll link to it below, of course.
Yeah. Fine. Take the English version.
Oh, I think I showed the German version, I think, on one of my videos, and I think everyone was like, "What are you doing? Just right click, or there's a banner at the top, Rob." Anyway, sorry, interrupted.
No problem. But I think these smart mount tools are very, very good for identifying, and also the Docker image. This guy on GitHub has done. He's also a German, by the way.
Game Steuler 94.
Right. I know his right name. I have some communication with him, but I don't know if he wants me to do that. And of course, there is again, other hard disk smart mount tools like Hard Disk Sentinel, perhaps. He's from a Romanian, Bulgarian guy.
Oh, no, I don't, but I'll add that to the comments below for everyone.
Hard Disk Sentinel is not freeware, it's a shareware. You remember shareware?
Oh, wow. We are going back. I was just reading your article on cheetah drives, and I had an absolute nostalgia kick. But so, yeah, I'll add that to the list.
I have some good connection with this Hard Disk Sentinel guy. And I told him to take the code and write it in his program. So the Hard Disk Sentinel also knows what farm data is now, and he can tell you if the drive is affected or not.
Phenomenal. I mean, leading on ever so slightly. So I think another claim, basically another question a lot of people have raised, and I touched on it in my first video, and you've touched on it a few times in your most recent articles, sort of dancing around with Seagate, and you sort of alluded to it there. But all of this seems to be about Seagate. But I think we have to acknowledge that, notwithstanding we've got no confirmation that the hard drive the influx of these drives comes from Chia farming. But why is it only Seagate in the discussion right now?
I think
it seems really odd.
I think, in my opinion, of course, it's only my opinion. I believe there are other drives affected, but we don't identify them right now.
I think, when we look at those spikes, and hopefully I've shown a few other ones on screen earlier on about the sheer number of those driving sale year on year and quarterly reports that Seagate loves putting out. There were some people talking about it's either difficult or impossible to modify some of that smart information on some of those alternate brands. I question that, how true that is. But that's what some people are saying about some of the procedures and abilities to modify the information on these drives to make them appear brand new. But how many, when you've made recommendations to people that reported their drives to you via your website, and you've passed that information on to Seagate, have those users got back to you with anything that Seagate have supplied to them? Because technically Seagate don't really have to give any kind of warranty or refund really on this if you wanted to go black and white legal. But I'd be very interested to see how because they don't really want to open the floodgates, as you mentioned yourself. I'm sure their legal teams have become very wary. That would be a lovely way to put it.
That's an interesting story. One guy from Austria has written a mail to Seagate US directly. I think he has 4 affected drives. And Seagate US was very interested in getting these drives. And they sent him drives ahead.
Okay.
Nobody in Germany wants to do this. Seagate Germany is not interested in getting these drives. Apart from these farm frauded drives I wrote about today. Perhaps that's new for Seagate. I really don't know.
Well, I'm just sort of wondering, because my probably my largest concern as someone who uses quite a lot of storage media personally, notwithstanding YouTube, blah, 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 is I'm in Europe, and the rest of the world, we've got Australia, we've got Japan, we've got China, we've got America, and notwithstanding some wonderful political landscape we're currently in, with social, but we could talk about that another time. But we are not, Europe as a bloc, we are not the biggest consumers of hard drives. We are. So if there were those exabytes worth of drive data or data drives floating around trying to be resold, I'm just wondering why it's not been so bigger impact outside of Europe. Understandably, of course, to introduce these drives in the amount of time it would go into to freshen these drives up. That's a polite way to put it. But, how concerned do you think people outside of Europe should be about this?
I think they should be really concerned about it. But I'm just getting an idea because, we're in Germany, we have good consumer rights. No? If you buy a drive, you buy a new drive, of course, and you you don't get what you pay for. You send it back. I really don't know if it's similar in the US, something like that, or you get what you pay for, or you get what you have got these drives and now be happy. Perhaps. I really don't know. Perhaps the consumer rights are not so good as in Germany. Germans are more, they think more about it, perhaps. Well, I don't know. But,
no, I see what your point now. Again, I can only speak for the UK, but generally our Consumer Rights Act is pretty bulletproof in terms of storage media. Again, harking back ever so slightly to my days in e-retail, if there were plenty of ways in which a person who did not feel that the product they had purchased was correct, they could return that very quickly. We were talking high street, we were talking e-retail. Even if the position was either softer or stronger in the US, again, I'm sure there'll be parity to a certain degree. It just feels like that's where the money is. So all I'm wondering is, are a lot of these drives, it's easier to put them into the UK, for example, than it is to get them into the US. So again, we're being hypothetical here, but for example, if I purchase products on an Eastern website like AliExpress or Alibaba or anything like that, I've noticed a lot of the time when I purchase items over a certain volume, not so much price but scale, they can make their way through repackaging or redistribution centres in the Netherlands, and then they make their way to the UK. It actually speeds up shipping a great deal. I don't think they use containers, and I'm not sure what that process would be for the US and how easy it, because with stock being checked as it goes across borders and stuff, that might be one of the ways in which these drives coming out of the East would be repurposed and flooding into a European market more easily, because I know
Perhaps, yeah.
the soft checks on a lot of that stuff that comes in to those relay points in the Netherlands. Again, some of the stuff that we've ordered through, some of the quite premier brands I've worked with in the past have used those centres. And some of these have been companies based in Taiwan, not just China, Hong Kong and stuff. This has come from Taiwan as well. And it still has seemingly gone through those little transit points. So I don't know if that would be a soft point where these drives en masse could make it in. But again, purely hypothetical.
As you mentioned Hong Kong, there was one dealer really largely involved in that scam. He came from Hong Kong and he sent to Australia, he sent to Thailand, and of course he got these drives from China, I believe.
But I mean, again, to put you ever so slightly on the spot, with all of these reports that you've read on these drives, if you had to pick one or two out that have made you go, oh, this is huge, or this is a bigger deal than anything, has there been any reports that you've sort of read and gone, wow, this is the first major domino, the one, possibly the catalyst that made you start writing further up articles?
Yeah, we don't know. It was getting larger and larger, no?
Even with, I've just done videos, and the comments in my videos already have left me quite perturbed by just how widespread this is. And you're right, the numbers outside of Europe are growing on these. And it really is just a case of, one, checking the drives as you purchase them, of course, but hoping that Seagate are nailing this down in the background, and hoping to God that another brand like WD or Toshiba aren't suddenly going to have to put out a press statement that, a couple of exabytes here or there or everywhere have suddenly turned out to be moody. But thank you so much for joining us today. Again, everything we've discussed today are going to be linked in the description below. And again, do check out the latest article regarding those modified farm data reports as well, because man alive, guys, that is not good news. That was our one little thing that we were holding on to desperately as verification process, and it looks like we can't even hold on to that anymore. But thank you so much for joining us today, Lutz. Again, links to Heise and all your work, and all that Chia article as well. Please check that out. I really enjoyed that. Now, following that conversation with Lutz Labs over the current state of affairs with a lot of these moody drives that are being sold, they are used, being sold as new, and the update, as you can see from the article there on screen, regarding that farm data is now being modified, and hopefully when Seagate get their hands on those drives, they'll find out more about exactly how it was done and maybe find a way to identify it. And as we said, that there was another great article over on Blocks and Files by Chris Meller. Now, Chris Meller here, although it details a lot of the stuff that we've already seen over from the on Heise.de, it's also worth highlighting it has some great statements from Seagate.
Seagate has not sold or distributed these mislabeled drives to retailers. We recommend that retailers purchase drives only from certified Seagate distribution partners to ensure they are purchasing and selling only new or Seagate factory recertified drives. Drives refurbished by Seagate, factory certified and resold under the Seagate Drive Circularity Program, can be identified by the green bordered white drive label and the designation factory recertified. These are clearly used drives that are fraudulently sold as new drives on the open market. So the buyer gets these drives, they're clearly used. They bought them at a new price, and that is what is happening from what we can tell early in this investigation. The majority of those drives, so they've come from an OEM or they come from a cloud provider, they've been pulled and then they've sold out on the open market as new. Those are clearly fraudulent drives. So we really want to try to make sure customers know who they're buying them from and use our tools to validate that they're parts and that the product they bought is in warranty. So in the case of what we're seeing in this fraud, again, those are largely used drives sold as new. We also see some counterfeit labels where country names aren't spelled correctly. There's a whole host of things that you can start to identify in a label that are pretty good indicators of fraud. We have a security and brand council. We engage authorities and will take down resellers where we've identified fraudulent activities. And if they're resellers of ours, we try to proactively work with them. And a lot of times, in the majority of cases, they're unaware that they have this fraudulent inventory. So we work with them on trying to identify where they source that from and correct that with those parties that have been identified. We've actually even had a third-party investigative firm that'll continue to conduct these buys on our behalf and then take any necessary legal actions required. So we take this very seriously. We hate to see our customers being the recipient of these fraudulent drives. We try to make it right. Those resellers, the vast bulk of them, will buy first-party drives from their distributors for obvious reasons. They get a good price, they're trustworthy, they have backup, they have support, so on and so forth. But there'll be some who may buy drives from somewhere else. This is not something that Seagate can prevent even if it wished. Drives that are new legitimate drives, but they are sold outside of their region, are not eligible for warranty in a region other than where they were sold. So typically, we will see gray market, in particular for markets like China. We are working very closely to make sure that those clearly say China only. Those are typically new drives and not an issue, except when a customer buys them from out of region, they're looking for a deal. They'll quickly realize, should they have an issue, that those are not eligible for return in a region that they were sold. So that's not uncommon. You might have resellers that warranty those products for a longer period of time. That's at their discretion, but it's important the public knows we warranty those drives for only 6 months. In general, we've had a second-hand market for a very long time. I think it's really proliferated with e-tail and the ability to have third-party marketplaces that can sell. I think eBay is one of the marketplaces where we see a lot of third-party activity. Even Amazon third-party continues to grow, and so it's really important buyers are aware of who that third party is. We encourage them to buy first-party material because that is what we sell to Amazon. That is legitimate. Anything that comes through third-party, make sure you're buying from a reputable seller on Amazon.
OEMs and system integrators treat drives as components, building systems using them, like servers, and then supplying the systems either to distributors who then sell to resellers, directly to resellers, or directly to larger customers. A regional supplier may wish to sell off an inventory of unwanted drives, perhaps ones with too low a capacity for their current customers, and offer them at a lower price to resellers. This can be an attractive price to both in-region and out-of-region resellers or e-tailers who buy the drives to sell on. But Seagate then deems that their warranty has been invalidated by the drive being sold out of its original region.
Now, at the time of recording, the 7th of March 2025, this does seem like it is a story that's not really going to go away. As mentioned earlier on in that discussion with Lutz, there are a lot of drives that seemingly have disappeared after all of that Chia farming. And although there's nothing concrete, I think it is arguable that you could logically see a lot of that storage drive media being repurposed in this fashion. And as the reports begin to increase, and increasing reports outside of Germany and Europe, I should say, as a whole, all add up to the case that you should really be aware about storage media you're buying. It isn't just a case anymore of you shouldn't buy used drives or you should only buy from authorized dealers, because in this case, 1, these have been drives that have been sold as new, and 2, authorized dealers have been affected. So if there's any bigger takeaway than anything else to take from this video, much like the other two, and of course the articles linked in the description, check your drives. If you've purchased hard drives from Seagate in the last 2, maybe even 3 years, double check. Look for scuffs and marks on the drive. Check the date of manufacture against the warranty period. See if there's any irregularities. Again, we cover that in video 2. And ultimately, be aware. Right now, it looks like maybe even trusting the FARM data isn't quite as bulletproof as we once thought, but still nonetheless, it seems it has to be a particularly sophisticated endeavour to modify that particular part of the drive and that consolidation tool there. But nonetheless, there are links to all of the tools, including the newer ones that we talked about today, along with the one on Docker, linked in the description below. Thanks again to Lutz Labs for helping us with today's video, as well as all of the sterling work he's been doing on this. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.